What if I told you a story so unbelievable, so utterly, jaw-droppingly impossible, that by the time it ends, you'll have no choice but to decide something about the nature of truth itself? A 16-year-old Indian boy, a sinking cargo ship, a single lifeboat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and a 450-pound Bengal tiger named Richard Parker. That's the setup. But Life of Pi by Yann Martel isn't really about survival. It's about storytelling. It's about religion. It's about the line between reality and the stories we tell ourselves to survive it. And by the end of this video, I promise you'll be sitting with a question you cannot easily shake. Which story is the better story? Let's dive in. The novel opens not on the ocean, but in a zoo. Specifically, the Pondicherry Botanical Garden Zoo in southern India, owned and run by Pi's father, Santosh Patel. Our narrator is Piscine Molitor Patel, Pi for short. And yes, that nickname required a campaign. Named after a famous Parisian swimming pool by his father's old friend, young Piscine endured years of schoolmates mispronouncing his name as pissing. So on his first day at a new school, he marched to every blackboard, wrote pi equals 3.14, drew a circle, and declared his own rebirth. The name stuck. Growing up in a zoo, Pi develops a fascinatingly nuanced worldview about animals. He pushes back on the romantic idea that wild animals are free and zoos are prisons. In his view, animals are deeply territorial creatures of habit, and a well-managed zoo simply provides a compressed version of exactly what a wild animal needs: food, shelter, safety, and familiar space. This philosophy matters. It will save his life. But Pi's most extraordinary quality is his spirituality. By age 16, he is simultaneously and sincerely a Hindu, a Christian, and a Muslim. He doesn't see contradiction in this. He simply wants to love God in all his forms. There's a wonderfully comic scene where his pundit, his priest, and his imam all run into him and his family on a seaside esplanade. Each man claiming Pi as his devout follower, each horrified that the other two are right. They demand he choose. Pi's quiet answer: "I just want to love God." It silences everyone. In 1977, political unrest under Indira Gandhi's government pushes Pi's family to emigrate to Canada. The Pondicherry Zoo is sold, and the animals are to be shipped to various zoos in North America. The family boards the Tsimtsum, a Japanese cargo ship, along with several of their animals, including a Bengal tiger named Richard Parker, who got his name from a clerical error that swapped the hunter's name with the tiger's. Pi's father always found that funny. They leave Madras and sail across the Bay of Bengal, through the Strait of Malacca, to Manila, then east across the Pacific. Pi is 16 years old and intoxicated with adventure. Then, on the fourth day out from Manila, something goes catastrophically wrong. Pi wakes in the early morning to strange sounds. He goes up to the main deck and discovers the ship is already listing badly, sinking fast. In the chaos, animals loose, water rushing in, crew members panicking, Pi is thrown overboard by two sailors and lands, miraculously unhurt, in a lifeboat that has already been partially deployed. Within minutes, the Tsimtsum sinks, taking Pi's entire family with it. It makes a sound, Pi tells us, like a monstrous metallic burp. Pi is alone, or so he thinks. The lifeboat is 26 feet long, orange, enclosed at one end with a tarpaulin. And underneath that tarpaulin, Richard Parker, a fully grown adult male Bengal tiger, weighing 450 pounds, who has apparently been hiding there in a drugged stupor since the ship sank. But before we meet Richard Parker properly, let's talk about the other passengers. A zebra with a shattered leg lands in the lifeboat. An orangutan named Orange Juice, a beloved zoo matriarch, drifts in on a raft of bananas. And a spotted hyena emerges from under the tarpaulin. What follows is a brutal, disturbing sequence. The hyena attacks and kills the zebra. Orange Juice, gentle, vegetarian, almost motherly, defends herself with startling ferocity, but ultimately the hyena kills her too. And then Richard Parker appears and dispatches the hyena in seconds. Pi is now alone on the boat with a Bengal tiger. His options: jump in the ocean and die, or figure out how to coexist. Being the son of a zookeeper turns out to matter enormously. Pi understands animal psychology. He knows that rank, territory, and dominance define the hierarchy. He builds a small raft tied to the lifeboat, keeping himself at a safe distance while still being too far from shore to consider abandoning the boat. He reads the survival manual in the locker. He finds water, emergency rations, fishing gear, flares, a compass. He begins to organize himself. And then, crucially, he hears Richard Parker make a sound he recognizes from his father's zookeeping stories, prussin, a quiet puffing through the nose that tigers use to signal harmless intent, friendly intentions. In that moment, Pi makes a decision that sounds insane. He will tame Richard Parker. Using the whistle, the rolling sea as a punishment, since the tiger gets seasick, and consistent conditioning, Pi establishes himself as the dominant presence on the boat. He is the one who provides food. He is the one who controls the territory. Richard Parker slowly accepts this. They will be companions for 227 days. What follows is one of literature's most remarkable extended survival sequences. Martel is meticulous and visceral. Pi learns to fish, first awkwardly, then with increasing skill using gaffs and nets. He butchers flying fish and dorados and turtles, activities that horrify his vegetarian soul but keep him and Richard Parker alive. His first kill, a flying fish, reduces him to tears. By week 5, he's biting tails with his teeth to subdue them. He tends the 12 solar stills, ingenious devices that use sunlight to distill fresh water from seawater. He catches rain. He rations obsessively. He maintains routine. Prayers at dawn, noon, and dusk. Hindu, Christian, and Muslim in turn. Fishing, feeding Richard Parker before himself. Maintaining the boat, writing in his diary until his pens run out of ink. He faces extraordinary events. A pod of dolphins visits for a whole day. Whales surface alongside him and seem to regard him with curiosity. Once, a whale's eye, the size of his head, stares directly at him from the water's surface. He fires flares at ships that never see him. He goes through storms that nearly capsize the boat. He loses the raft in a terrifying squall and has to survive on the boat itself, inches from the tiger, while waves crash over them both. And there is darkness, real psychological darkness. Pi describes despair as a black weight that descends with brutal unpredictability and always passes, replaced by the will to live and the presence of God. He holds on. He always holds on. His relationship with Richard Parker deepens into something no human language quite captures. The tiger terrifies him, but the tiger also saves him from despair, from loneliness, from giving up. Richard Parker's sheer animal vitality forces Pi to engage, to plan, to fight. Without Richard Parker, I would have died, Pi admits. He kept me alive. Near the end of his journey, Pi stumbles upon something impossible. A lush, floating island made entirely of densely woven algae, populated by hundreds of thousands of meerkats. The island is covered in bright green vegetation and freshwater ponds that are full of fish. Pi and Richard Parker recover there, eating, resting, regaining strength. Pi sleeps in trees alongside the meerkats, who swarm him at night like a fur blanket. But something is wrong. The meerkats don't sleep on the ground at night. Richard Parker returns to the lifeboat each evening without fail. And one day, Pi climbs a tree in the forest and discovers something that chills him to the bone. Among the leaves, each wrapped in layer after layer of tightly packed foliage, are human teeth. 32 of them. A complete set. The island is carnivorous. At night, the freshwater ponds become acidic, dissolving everything that falls in. Someone had come here before. Someone had lived here. And the island had consumed them, leaving only teeth and silence. Pi understands immediately this island is beautiful, this island is comfortable, and this island will kill him slowly, without violence, simply by keeping him from the rest of humanity. It is a seductive trap. He packs what he can and leaves. It's one of the novel's most haunting passages, a parable about the difference between mere survival and a life truly lived. After 227 days at sea, the lifeboat washes ashore in Mexico. Pi is skeletal, barely conscious, near death. Richard Parker leaps off the boat, runs 100 yards along the beach, and disappears into the jungle without looking back. Pi is devastated, not by his own survival, by the farewell. He never looked back. Pi says, "That bungle goodbye still hurts me to this day." He is found by locals, taken to a hospital, and eventually interviewed by 2 investigators from the Japanese Ministry of Transport, Mr. Okamoto and Mr. Chiba, who are trying to determine why the Tsimtsum sank. They listen to Pi's story, and they don't believe a word of it, so Pi offers them a second story. In this one, there is no tiger, no zebra, no hyena, no orangutan. There are only 4 survivors: Pi, his mother, a sailor with a broken leg, and the cook. The cook is brutal and manipulative. He amputates the sailor's leg, supposedly to save it from infection, but really to use as fishing bait. The sailor dies. The cook kills Pi's mother. Pi kills the cook. It is brutal. It is believable. And it maps exactly onto the first story. The sailor is the zebra, the cook is the hyena, the orangutan is Pi's mother, and Pi is Richard Parker. The investigators sit with this for a long time. Then Mr. Okamoto asks Pi which story he prefers, and Pi asks them the same question. Both agree the story with animals is better. Pi looks at them and says simply, "And so it goes with God." The novel closes with the investigator's report, which states, almost as an afterthought, that Pi's survival was unparalleled in the history of shipwrecks, and that no castaway has ever survived so long in the company of an adult Bengal tiger. The report recommends closing the case. So what is Life of Pi really about? At its heart, it's a novel about the stories we need to survive. Not just physical survival, emotional, spiritual, psychological survival. Pi chooses the story that makes the world bearable. He chooses the story that carries grace, meaning, and even beauty through the most horrific events imaginable. It's about faith, not the faith of certainty, but the faith of choosing. Faith is not passive. It's an act of will, like survival itself. It's about the relationship between humans and animals and what the boundary between the two really means. Richard Parker is terrifying. Richard Parker is also Pi's truest companion. They are bound to each other in ways that transcend species. And perhaps most of all, it's about the question, does it matter if a story is literally true if it is emotionally, spiritually, and humanly true? Yann Martel doesn't answer that question for you. He just makes sure you can't stop asking it. That was Life of Pi by Yann Martel, winner of the 2002 Man Booker Prize, and one of the most quietly devastating novels of the last 30 years. If this summary moved you, I'd encourage you to read the original. The survival sections especially are worth every word. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit that like button and subscribe. New book summaries every week. And tell me in the comments, which story do you believe? The one with the tiger or the one without? I'll see you in the next one.